Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shawna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
This week we're talking about conflict in teams. And before you hit skip and move to your next podcast or the next video on your YouTube channel, do recognize that conflict can be productive. It's not necessarily something you want to avoid. I'm Shawna Corden. I work with teams that are in conflict, before they get to conflict, after they're in conflict. I'm happy to make teams work better. And today we're really going to talk more about the necessary and productive parts of conflict when it's done the right way. So why have conflict at all? Well, conflict is that sort of healthy pebble in your shoe that really makes people strive for something better. It's a little bit like competition, healthy competition. It's necessary for that innovation. So I offer an idea, naturally our egos get involved and someone else bumps it up to one better. Well, or it spins off another idea like, hey, what if we did this? That's always fun to do too. But conflict in teams is this sort of healthy pushing each other to be better. Now, unhealthy conflict is more personal, attacks people's opinions, appearance, motivations, intentions, not healthy. So what are the different kinds of conflict that I see in my practice? Well, it could be just task conflict. You said you were going to do this, you didn't do it, or I was going to do that, why did you do that without asking me? That sort of thing. And that's easy to resolve. That's like what we would apply a RACI chart to, saying, let's talk about all of the decisions that need to be made by this team and who's going to do what in terms of the work, who's the one that's accountable, who supports, who gets informed, etc., etc. Easy to do. If you want me to work through a RACI chart on your team, happy to do that. That's a walk in the park. Then there's relationships. And sometimes we have these sort of karmic relationships at work where people push our buttons. Maybe it's something that we see in ourselves that's illustrated in this other person and we don't like it. It could be that we feel that someone is triggering us because they're doing the necessary activities to promote themselves in the workplace and we're not, and we're resentful. It could be someone felt like they were outed out of a job that they should have received. They deserved it more than this other person did, and so on and so on. Lots of relationship things. We can clarify what those triggers are for people. Generally, triggers are another form of healthy competition. It's a wake-up call to say, hey, get moving. And then there's processes. Inevitably, in matrixed organizations, or people will be measured in a way that causes conflicting objectives. It's like, I need to ship as many things outside the, door as possible so our organization gets revenue, and yet I'm penalized for these other measures that are someone else's reward. That happens all the time. I try to clarify those things, but in general, it will happen a bit. And then there's goal conflict. I'm trying to save money. I'm trying to lose weight. If I lose weight, I'll have to upgrade some pieces in my wardrobe, but then I'll have to spend money on those things. So that's just a simple, obvious thing like that. Analyzing where the majority of your conflict comes from is important. It's usually task-oriented or process-oriented, and sometimes it's disguised as a relationship. And we'll get into that more. But the important thing is that we address them early. Often what happens is it feels a bit like a pinch when you first notice this conflict. It's a bit like boundaries. And then people don't say anything because they have this artificial harmony in their workplace. And we've talked about that in the podcast a couple of times. And then what happens is you get pinched again and pinched again. And finally, people have had it and they blow up and they have fired no warning shot whatsoever. They just explode saying, why are you doing this? You've done this 10 times. But this is the first time the offending party has been informed of this. So we want to avoid that at all costs, because sometimes what's said in that eruption is something that's quite hard to take back. It's important that in this process of addressing them early, that the safety is present for people to express themselves. We want to express our challenges about the problems, not the people. So when we get into personal attacks, questioning intention, integrity, things like that, that's very hard to repair. So we want to keep it on the problem, talk about the issue in conflict, not the people that are in the conflict. Because there's a lot of assumptions and extremes that are happening there because people are too emotional at that point. We want to practice to the point of feeling like a kindergartner, active listening. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. So as people are volunteering their concerns and we are giving them the space to express them safely, we want to be able to paraphrase back what we heard before we add on, acknowledge, anything like that. So if someone's complaining about the temperature in the break room being too high, the first thing that needs to come out of anybody's mouth is, I hear you saying the temperature is too high. Then ask your question or acknowledge or agree. But make sure that you're paraphrasing in the process. That's part of that active listening piece. We also want to make sure that we're listening for not just what's being said, how it's being said, and what's not being said. If there's an implication that someone's responsible for the heat in the break room and it's not being said, we want to say, is there anything more you want to express about that? Or do you feel it's a particular person's responsibility? And so on and so on. We do want leaders to have the team collaborate to solve the problem. Too often leaders will come in and they'll act like mom and dad and they'll say, okay, this person's right, this person's wrong. And as much as it's fun to be Solomon and be wise in your judgment, it's actually much more effective to have the parties negotiate amongst themselves using your rules of engagement that you've already developed as a team. So being respectful, not talking over each other, looking for a win-win. All of these things might be part of your rules of engagement that you want the team to adhere to as they collaborate to solve the problem. Now, it's not always possible. Sometimes you will have to come in and you'll have to mediate, and that's just fine. The mediation process is acting like an interpreter between the two parties. I hear so-and-so saying this. Is that accurate? Okay. Joe, what do you think about what you just heard? Joe needs to acknowledge what he just heard before he says what he heard. So all of these things are really important. And then finally, once the dust has settled and people are back to their regular plans, we want to do a follow-up. Is it still working? Was the collaboration effective? What lessons did we learn? In hindsight, how could we have prevented this if that's a necessary conversation? And what are some best practices? So it might be, let's take it out of the building. Let's make sure that we're in a place where people don't have deadlines. Let's make sure that calm heads are prevailing. You know, let's take a break if it's getting too heated. Things like that. We want to make sure that we do the follow-up And then that actually gets posted on the wall the next time that we are in productive or maybe bordering unproductive conflict. So you might think about, well, why would I want to work on this? I'd rather just avoid it and stuff it and just make sure that things go on. Well, there's all kinds of productive conflict out there. And a lot of times it is generated by just our general personality type. We all have tendencies and preferences about how we like to work. And when others approach us with their preferences and tendencies that are different than ours, sometimes we can butt heads. Some people, love to procrastinate till the last minute, and then they slide into home base with their homework and just say, here it is. And they're done, they're comfortable with that. Others are like, I need to pace this, I need to be able to scale it, I need it to be predictable. And they just rub each other the wrong way. Well, the natural solution to that is, how do you adapt to one another's styles? How do you meet in the middle? I wrote a whole book on this. So we want organizations to have discussions, to find places to meet in the middle when they're more polarized in their approach to work, to subjects, things like that. Unproductive conflict is where we get personal. We attack the person, we attack their opinion, we attack the origin of the formation of that opinion, whether it might be a data source or how they're thinking about the problem. These are just insulting. Doesn't help anybody to do it that way. We really want to make sure that we're looking at the facts. What are the unshakable facts in the situation? And what is it that we are trying to achieve? Common goals, alignment. What can we agree on? Those things are very important. So when it comes to the break room metaphor, what is it that we want from our break room? Well, we probably want it to be relaxing. We probably want it to be kind of a serene space to break away from the pressures of the day. We might want it to be a lively and social space where we can snack, socialize, things like that. Those could be very different perspectives. And so collect those perspectives from everybody and say, what is it that we want the break room to be like? And maybe we alternate days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's the Zen. Tuesday, Thursday, there's a party going on there. It's a cantina. So think about that, discuss that, air those opinions, get everyone's opinions out there, and then start talking about alignment. How do we get there? So things like that can be very important and good exercises for teams to work on, even though the break room seems like a big deal. If I don't like it, I'm going to go sit in my car. Well, it is a big deal because those are where you're going to build the muscle for how are we going to resolve this emergency drill with our carrier that can't get any of our product out, that sort of thing. So in terms of strategies and building that muscle, I would suggest that you have some conflict exercises that you do as a team. And probably one of the best is to examine a past conflict with the team. Now, if the topic is too recent, too sore, still too tender, I'd avoid something like that. You may want to make up a case study, or you might want to pull a headline from the news and assign roles. These people are the CEOs, these people are the stockholders, this is the whistleblower. How are you going to resolve this conflict? Who was involved? What was the problem? Where did it take place? How was it resolved, if it has been resolved? Practice the active listening, practice role play, practice mediation. It doesn't have to be the leader being the mediator. It could be anybody. It might be the calmest head in the room. And then give feedback. This particular method that you used was especially calming. I felt triggered by this other approach. The word why made me defensive. Things like that can be very helpful. to build people's muscles in terms of conflict. Now, it's always great to take a deep breath. Sometimes it's better to walk, things like that. But have some focus, have some strategies for yourself, have some strategies for the team. Talk about how you want to do this. If you're noticing that your team has a complete absence of conflict, I'd suggest that you're not performing at the level that you really could be. It could be that your team needs to engage in more conflict, have less artificial harmony, because the main drawback of too much harmony is that you're not holding each other accountable. You know, if someone misses a deadline, you're too compassionate. You're like, there, it's okay. We know you're good. It's like, well, no, the team was counting on that. The customers were counting on that, whatever it might be. The accountability piece is generally what goes out the window. So, up the game, and the game comes from giving feedback, being specific, and reconnecting to why you're doing what you're doing. So, hopefully this has been helpful for your team. If you're looking to have a facilitated session for your team, if you're looking to practice conflict, I'm your guy. You can reach me at shawnacorden.com. Join us next time. We'll be talking about enhancing the engagement of the team. What is it that makes people feel engaged? What is it that makes people disengaged? And of course, as always, we would love it if you would invite your friends, give us a thumbs up if you're watching us out on YouTube, give us 5 stars if you're watching the podcast, and don't forget that we can help your team with just about any challenge that you have. Until next time, take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shawna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shawnacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shawna Corden.